Well, have you ever received a gift that was kind of insulting? How many of you have had that happen? I have, from my own dad. How many of you, you kind of look at the gift and you think, was this a swing and a miss, or was this just a swing at me? You ever have that moment where you get a gift and you're just kind of wondering, what were you thinking? I have a few stories here of people who have gotten that sort of gift before. We're going to talk about them just for a couple minutes, but I hope you can at least laugh with some of these. Some of them are just almost too sad to laugh at. A couple of them might put a little bit of a smile on your face. There was one boy. This one is almost too sad to laugh at for me. 12-year-old boy had the job of snow shoveling, and that was his chore around the house, and he must have lived in Superior because evidently it snowed a lot. Well, he kept complaining. The parents kept saying, "You're not doing a good enough job." And he kept telling him, the snow shovel is lousy. It's rusted. It's bent. The bottom's not even. It doesn't make a good contact with the sidewalk. So Christmas rolls around, and they give him a new snow shovel. Now, that wouldn't be so bad. That was his only gift. Ow. I don't know. Maybe, it might have just been a very poor family or something, but as a 12-year-old boy, that just wouldn't feel good, would it? So then you have the kid who gets chocolate, tweezers, and a diet book on Valentine's Day. Teenager gets the ultimate weight loss solution for teens. But hey, it was recommended by Dr. Phil. Poor kid. As a teenager, who wants to get that? She didn't say who gave it to her, though. One 13-year-old girl described her stepmom as the evil stepmother. Evidently, there was a little bit of an antagonistic relationship, and it showed up one day where she gave her acne cream as a gift. Yeah, that didn't go over real well. One lady had just given birth to her first child about 5 or 6 months earlier, and she was always very into her appearance, very healthy. She worked really hard to lose the baby weight, and she had finally taken off all the baby weight. She was finally back to her original weight when her mother-in-law gave her a refrigerator magnet that looked like a pig. Now, that wasn't so bad, but there was a motion sensor and a speaker in it, and every time she would open the refrigerator, it would oink at her. She did not enjoy that gift very much. How insulting could it possibly be? I mean, there'd be nothing wrong with giving a 35-year-old man a book on how to get a job, could there? That couldn't be insulting to anybody, could it? One girl was given a book that for some people might be a great gift. She was given a book on how to live alone and be content in being single. There's nothing wrong with a book like that. It can be a great book for the right person. But when it's your high school graduation gift and you're 18, this didn't show a lot of confidence in her long-term future, did it? That was a little bit insulting right there. But the one that really got me, the one that just made me say, ew, was a lady who for Christmas got her own socks. Now, to understand why this was such an ew, you have to understand the story. She went out of town to visit somebody who she didn't know well, but her husband did, and they were staying in this person's home, and this person went into her luggage, took out her socks, put a bow on them, and gave them to her for Christmas. So not only are you getting your own socks, but you're just sitting there thinking, this person has been going through my luggage without my knowing it, and when I'm not there. That's kind of creepy. Sometimes giving a gift can be a really good thing. Sometimes we need to exercise a little more wisdom, don't we? Sometimes just giving isn't enough. Sometimes we have to be smart about how we give. And that's not just true in gift giving, that's true in charity as well. And today's going to be a very difficult message. Let me just lay out a couple things before I get into it. I won't lie, I am wrestling with today's subject. But one, I don't want you to think I'm talking about tithing and giving to the church. That is a totally separate conversation. I am specifically talking about giving charity and giving to the poor today. Also, I want to make it very clear that this is a topic that can be very hard. I won't lie to you. I could spend the next hour telling you horror stories about times I've experienced personally people who have abused charity. And it's left me jaded in some ways. And at times, I have to force myself to step back and remind myself of how much good has happened in the lives of people through charity. And some of you are going to be, it's just a natural gift to give. To you today, I'm saying do wisdom in your giving. For some of us like me, it's easy to give in some places, harder to give to others. And I'm challenging people like me to take a step back and use wisdom, because there are times that we need to overcome our prejudices and our barriers and give. And not all of us are going to be in the same place. God will call some people to give in some situations and not others. And one doesn't make you more spiritual or more wise than the other. I'm calling today for wisdom for all of us to be obedient to God in the subject of giving to charity specifically. So let's move forward. I'll lay out my biases in the beginning here, but let's move forward. We're in a series called Flipped. If you haven't been here in a while, or if you didn't know, Flipped, we're spending 6 weeks. This is week 4 in the Sermon on the Mount. And the first week we saw how Jesus goes up on a mountain because he's a new Moses, is what Matthew was setting up in this. And he's giving a new law. And in the first week, we looked at the Beatitudes, where we saw where he's inviting people to participate in this new kingdom. And he doesn't go for the rich and the powerful. He goes for those who would need him, not those who you would think he would need. In the second week, we looked at how, now that he's invited you into the kingdom, here's how you're part of the kingdom: to be a salt and light to others. Salt is working inside of our hearts to be renewed like him, and light is the natural outpouring of that, where it moves past just ourselves and starts pouring into the lives of others, and especially even to those who are not yet in the church. Then the third week, we started to get into this idea of what this kingdom looks like, which is what the last 4 weeks of this series are. And last week, we looked at how to have conflict, and there's so much we could say. We just looked at one aspect of it, where we look at having dignity for both people involved. How conflict is something that you have to do with the aim of having both people come out of it better and stronger. This week we're looking at the subject of giving, and we're going to look at the first part of Matthew chapter 6. And remember, wherever you see underlined words, I always ask you to say those with me. And today I'm really mean. The first word on the second slide is underlined. So be ready. Guys with me? Watch out. Don't do your good deeds publicly. It's not about who sees you. A good deed's between you and God. That's what we're going to look at. To be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven. When you give to someone in need, don't do it as the hypocrites do. Hypocrite was a word for an actor. They would wear a mask, and they would do big plays and things like this, and sometimes just right out on the street. So they would start to blow trumpets and things to make noise to try to gather people around to watch their production. And so you're not going out like the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues and streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth, they have received all the reward they will ever get. But when you give to somebody in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father, who sees everything, will reward you. Now, this is part of a thing. There are subsets in the Sermon on the Mount, and there's a subset here. This is the first of 3 things where Jesus has a formula. Don't do this publicly to make yourself look good or to feel better about yourself. Do these things privately, only for God to see, and He will be your reward, not mankind. And your reward is eternal. And so they have this set of 3 things where He's going to cover giving, prayer, and fasting using this formula. And today we're just covering the first of those 3. But He's saying, don't do these things to be noticed. These things are done for God, not for self. These things are done to invest in other people, not to make ourselves feel good. And there's an element of that you're going to see in here that you may have read this text 100 times and not caught before, but we're going to look at something today that for many of you will be very new, and you'll walk out of here going, I didn't know that. And I hope that it walks out with a good challenge and a real blessing for you. But really what God is saying here is charity isn't about what it does for you. It's about what it does for building the kingdom and investing in the life of that person who's receiving it. Charity is done with the dignity of the person receiving it in mind. And that's what we're about to look at today. Now, to really understand this, we have to understand giving in the ancient culture. In some ways, it's very similar to today. In other ways, it's very different. And the first thing we have to understand about giving in their culture was it was incredibly important. There was no other social safety net. People were expected to give to the poor, and they could do that through the temple, had a fund, they could do that through a local synagogue, or they could do that when directly they see the person on the street begging. But the person on the street begging to them was a little bit different than it is in our culture, and we'll see some of that today, but not all of it. But the reason they were out on the street begging is that was the only social safety net. And if you did not give to that person, if nobody gave to that person, it's not only starvation that they face. For a young woman, probably means prostitution. For a man or a woman, it could mean slavery. There was a lot worse that could happen to them than just starving if people didn't give. It was important. Driven to enough hunger, maybe they start to try to steal, and maybe they die for that crime. Giving was a direct part of the very fabric of their society. Because there was no Social Security. There was no Red Cross. It was people gave or terrible things happened in their culture. Giving was hugely important, and Jesus emphasized it a lot. But there's something that we can grasp that. There's something that's much harder for us to grasp. And this is something that's going to be new. You've heard me mention this many times. But I hope to take it just a step farther today. We're not going to go super deep, but we have to understand that theirs was what is called a shame and honor culture. You've heard me say that. And by the way, the giving is still mandated in Islam and many other Semitic countries to this day. It's still part of their social safety net. It still is their only social safety net in many places. This is part of their culture. It's part of their world. But so is shame and honor. If you're at a place where you need to beg, God must be punishing you for something. You must have messed up. There's shame involved. But if you can give, well, God must have blessed you. If you can give, that could bring you honor. And shame and honor was such a big thing to them. If you had honor, maybe your marriage proposal's going to be accepted. Maybe you can get into that guild and get that job that you're after. If you have shame, your circle of friends is shrinking rapidly. You're rejected by the community. Now, I can't fully explain all of this to you today, but there is a guy who, I can't blanking on his name right now, but he runs a YouTube channel called Inspiring Philosophy. And despite the name, it's not really about philosophy. He does apologetics, and he does some great research on biblical culture and things like that. And I can't tell you I agree with every single thing the guy says, but I can tell you I listen to everything the guy says because he's very smart and he does some good research. And he did about a 22-minute video on the shame and honor culture. And from about 30 seconds into the video for about 2 minutes, I'm just going to show you a quick clip of some of what he says.
Instead, ancient cultures revolved around public honor and shame. What you were in the ancient world was defined by how you were seen publicly. Why is this important? Well, we often read the biblical text through our modern lenses and do not realize how important honor and shame were for the ancient world. And because of this, we miss a lot about what the biblical stories are saying because we lack the cultural context of ancient honor-based societies. The first thing we need to note is what honor and shame meant in the ancient world. Joseph Plevnik defines honor as a claim to worth that is publicly acknowledged. To have honor is to have publicly acknowledged worth. Shame, as the opposite of honor, is a claim to worth that is publicly denied and repudiated. To be shamed is always negative. It means to be denied or to be diminished in honor. Honor is what an ancient person strived to obtain, and it was more of a group value. One's identity came from the honor and value they obtained from their community. So your identity would be something your community would give you. It did not come from internal markers you may have about yourself. It came from what your community said about you. Mark Strauss notes honor was the gaining of status from others, and shame is the loss of it from others. In contrast, in today's world, one is encouraged more to do things that avoid causing internal guilt, and one is encouraged to have high self-esteem. You're encouraged to have your own identity and to stand out. Modern cultures focus more about internal feelings instead of external appearances. This is not to say the ancient world ignored internal feelings, like we do not ignore the importance of honor and shame today. But it is more about the importance each culture places on these paradigms. The ancient world cared more about public honor than having self-esteem. Things like wealth and power were often vehicles to obtain public honor, over an internal sense of gratification.
So I hope you caught that. Part of what he is saying is that honor is something that you get from your community. It's not an internal thing. It doesn't matter how you feel about yourself in that culture. What matters is how everybody else feels about you. And so when you're shaming another person, you are degrading them in front of everybody. And when you are trying to bring honor to yourself, you're trying to build yourself up in front of everybody, and that can be a big part of your social advancement, a big part of your money-making opportunities, your marriage opportunities, your friendships. It can be done completely selfishly. So imagine honor being like coins in your pocket, and everyone walks around with some. So when you walk up to a person who needs charity and you hand them a coin, a literal coin, if you're making a big deal out of it, you're taking one of their honor coins back with you. You're not giving, you're exchanging. If you do your giving in private, God sees that, and you're going to have honor coins coming from Him instead of the community. Does that make sense to you? Here's the thing, it gets even worse because as pointed out in a book, and later on in that same video, he goes into the same thought, but there's a book called Misreading Scripture Through Western Eyes. And what they point out is that in the ancient world, there was only so much honor to go around. It was a limited good, and everyone was scrambling for more. Every public interaction you have would sometimes, some scholars called it an honor challenge. So when Jesus is butting heads with the Pharisees, Nicodemus wanted information. He went to Jesus quietly at night. The other Pharisees kept confronting Jesus in front of crowds during the day. They were honor challenging him. And it's not in any way a coincidence that he defeats them in a bunch of honor challenges days before he's killed. They wanted their honor back, is what was going on there. Honor was something you take from others. And so when you're going out and you're trying to look good by giving, what you're trying to do is take their honor for yourself. And that's what God rejects. God says, no, giving is not about yourself. Giving is about the other person. And no, you don't do it real publicly so that you can take honor. You do it privately. I'll give you the honor that you need. Your standing with me will be good. You do it privately because you want to protect the dignity of that other person. You're not just trying to build up their wallet. You're not just trying to fill their stomach. You're trying to give them a better life. You're trying to make something new happen in their hearts, and that's why we give. So what does all this teach us about giving today? It teaches us that just like then, we have to never give for the wrong reasons. And there are a lot of wrong reasons to give, aren't there? We all know them. We've all seen them. We've all been there, haven't we? Wrong reason to give, to look good in front of other people. Maybe we don't have the honor and shame thing that they had going on, but still it feels pretty good when everyone sees us giving and says, "Oh, you're such a great person." And we're like, yeah, that feels good. We still do that, don't we? How about the temptation to give because we feel guilty? We've accumulated so much, we know we have more than we need, and then we see this person who has so little, and I don't want to get down in their world, I don't want to have to really engage with them, but if I slip them a few bucks, I feel better about myself. And so we slip them a little something, and it's not about them. It's about feeling better. How many of us have ever experienced the person or been the person who gives a generous gift to somebody so now they owe you? Now they'll pay you back a little. Maybe in friendship, maybe in something else. Unfortunately, men have done this to women for years. Need I say more? Some people give generously because they're trying to extort from God. Hey, God, you see what I'm doing down here? Now can you answer that prayer? I've seen people give some pretty generous gifts, and I've seen some churches at times say no. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you're trying to buy favor with God without renewing your heart. That's not what the church is building on. We're building on renewed hearts. We're building on change. We're building on becoming more like Him. We're not interested in a bribe. We're interested in transformation. And people often want to give for the wrong reason. And frankly, there's no difference between these attitudes and the person who's giving to the poor merely to steal their honor. It's about self at that point, not about them. So you have a church that's well known for opening their doors and letting people come in to pray at any time. And you have a man who's a blue-collar worker. He's got a young kid. His job is quite a distance from his house, and his car breaks down, and he just doesn't know how he's going to get there. If he doesn't get there, he could lose his job. He needs his brakes fixed. And he looks at how much money he has, and he says, well, if I skip some lunches this week, I can fix my brakes, but I need $50 more. God, I need $50, and I need it fast so I can keep my job. And so he goes in and he starts praying, and he's crying out to God in this church. Well, there's another man in the community who was a businessman, and he has an opportunity to buy a .com that he knows he can flip down the road for millions. He knows he can really score big, but he needs $2 million, and he needs it fast to buy that .com. So this businessman sees this church and thinks, what can it hurt? I'll go in there and pray. So he goes in and he sits down to pray, and he hears this other guy praying, and he can't help but think, I'm here for $2 million. This guy's here for $50. And he stands up, he takes out his wallet, he pulls out a $100 bill, and he goes over to the guy and he hands him the $100 bill. The guy's like, what? He says, I heard your prayer. Man, go take care of your family. Go take care of your brakes. Well, it's all good. Well, when I get paid next time, do you want me to meet you? No, this is a gift. You go. And the man is so grateful, and he hugs him, and he runs out of the church to go take care of his family. And the rich man watches him go, turns on and says, okay, God, now that I have your undivided attention, it's easy to give for the wrong reason, isn't it? It's easy to give when it's really about ourselves. And that's sad, but it's also common. Even the secular world understands this. Sarah Newman, in a blog on PsychCentral.com, said, true altruism means unselfish devotion to the other's welfare. Giving a gift is meant to be a way to express that devotion. Giving charity is meant to be a way to express devotion to their welfare. Not always just the temporary things. Why do we give? What's our goal? It's to truly impact the other person. So let's have a hypothetical. You have a homeless guy who's just come back from war, maybe has a few mental health issues. they have some depression, they have some anxiety, so they start to self-medicate and they get involved in drugs. This person has some needs, don't they? And they end up homeless. Well, when this person has some needs, what's their first need? It's food and shelter, isn't it? That's their immediate need. And you know the old phrase, they don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. A lot of times you're not going to get much farther until this need is met. So here's the problem. Because this is an immediate need, it's easy to just try to meet it and walk off. But is that their biggest need? It's most immediate. Is it the biggest need? So there was a guy who that actually happened to. A Vietnam veteran who came home and ended up on drugs. Ended up homeless. And he began to realize that his biggest need wasn't a cot for a night and a warm meal. His biggest need was to find long-term stability. His biggest need was to go a step farther. And that man, his name was Alex McElry. And Alex McElry lives in Alameda County, California, and somebody helped him. He received charity. When he received the charity, though, he didn't stop there. He realized, because that person not just invested in a place to sleep and some food for him, that person also invested in his long term, his good, helped him realize his own value. So when Alex got on his feet, got a job, saved up, even was able to get his own house, he thought, I'm doing pretty well right now. What can I do to give back? And he went out and he bought a couple beds and he turned his extra bedroom into a homeless shelter. With time, that started growing, and with time, it became an organization called Operation Dignity that now has 3 properties out in California, and at any given moment is housing about 100 vets and sometimes their families as well. Great things happen because of that. And I really respect what he's doing, because McElry isn't just giving them a temporary place to stay. He's trying to arrange job coaching for them. He's trying to arrange counseling. He's trying to arrange drug addiction recovery programs. He's trying to do things to help them develop stability and a quality of life. To me, that's a greater gift than the cotton and the food, isn't it? But here's the thing. How long does that gift last? You give them a better life, it lasts till the day they die, right? What if that's not the biggest gift? What if that's not the biggest need? What if the biggest need for these people is the same as it is for you and I? To know Jesus. What if the biggest gift is to invest not just in their temporal, but in their eternal? What if the biggest gift is to help them find not just a new life on earth, but a new life forever in heaven? What if that is deepest down what they most need to accomplish? So personally, I love charities that try to meet all 3. I love charities like Heifer International, where you can donate animals to poor villages. You can buy an ark that comes with chickens and cows and all this stuff, and you can revolutionize the village with the eggs, the meat, and the things that can be brought, the labor that an ox can do. Our church every year, and there's a little picture up there you can't see too well, but some of our teens and children do an Operation Christmas Child that we do. I love it. You know what I love about these 2 organizations? They meet immediate needs, but then they partner it with meeting eternal needs. They partner it with sharing the gospel. And here's the thing. A lot of organizations can meet the first 2 needs. Only the church can meet the third. And I'm convinced that is the biggest organization. The world that doesn't know Jesus can't bring people to him. The church can. And I am convinced that is the biggest need that people have. And why can the church do it? Because he did it for us. Maybe we were never homeless. Maybe we were never on drugs. But without him, we were broken. We were poor of heart. And he came, and he renewed us. Today is communion. And in communion, we celebrate the fact that he did this for us. In communion, we celebrate the fact that he made us new. So if you have your communion elements, I'm going to invite you to pull those out. we're going to think about what he did. What did Jesus do? Did he look down and say, they need a teacher? No, he looked and he said they need a Savior. Did he look down and say, these people need a quick touch and then they can go about their lives? He said, no, they need renewal. And so he went to the cross for us. And the night before he did, he sat down with his disciples and he told them in a Passover dinner, he took out bread, he said, take, eat. This is my body broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Soon after, he'd be going to the cross, he'd be beaten. Blood would pour from his head, his back, his wrists, his legs. And that blood was holy and it was cleansing. But before it happened, he predicted it and he said, with the wine, take, drink. This is my blood shed for you. Jesus, we thank you for your true love that you gave us. We thank you, Father, that your love was so far beyond anything we could ask for or comprehend. We thank you that you didn't just send gifts from on high, but you came and you dwelt among us. We thank you that the charity you gave us was renewing. And we ask, Father, that we're going to have attitudes that we're not content to just slip a dollar here and there, but that we look for ways to impact our world, to make it a better place, to make it a place where people can find you. And Father, let our church be on the forefront of doing that in our community. Help us, Father, to have hearts that are charitable in every level, not just with finances, but hearts that are charitable with love, charitable with time, charitable with giving. Help us to be your hands and feet. Help us, Father, to take in your reckless love and give it to the world around us who needs it so much. Pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus.